present Walt Disney's Disneyland.
When you wish upon a star, makes no difference who you are.
Each week as you enter this timeless land, one of these many worlds will open to you. Tomorrowland, promise of things to come. Fantasyland, the happiest kingdom of them all. Frontierland, tall tales and true from the legendary past. Adventureland, the wonder world of nature's own realm. Presenting this week from Adventureland and Operation Deepfreeze. And now, Walt Disney.
I know that most of you have been hearing and reading about the International Geophysical Year and its progress. In this great mass effort, thousands of scientists in 40 countries throughout the world are making a synchronized study of the Earth's surface, its inner depths, and the limitless space that surrounds us. Antarctica has been designated as a key area for scientific observations, and many nations will have bases there. The United States South Polar Expedition is called Operation Deepfreeze, and we have been privileged to send Disney cameramen as permanent members of this project. On a previous program, we showed you how Navy Task Force 43 planned and began Operation Deepfreeze. So, to all of the officers and men of the task force at all of the bases in Antarctica, we dedicate this program. And now, to tell you about their further progress and how they spent the long Antarctic night, here is Winston Hibler.
There are a number of reasons why the southernmost tip of the Earth has been chosen for scientific research. Antarctica is ideally suited for the study of celestial phenomena, such as cosmic rays and the mysterious aurora. The glaciers of this great land strongly influence the world's weather. Earthquakes and earth motion, geomagnetism. All these and many other mysteries will be explored in Antarctica by Operation Deepfreeze.
The project was well underway early in 1956 with the establishment of two main bases. One is located at McMurdo Sound. This is the Williams Air Operations Facility. The other base lies about 400 miles to the east. This is Little America number 5. During the first week of January 1956, the ships of Task Force 43 were moored at the edge of the bay ice about 5 miles from the site of Little America. Here at various offloading stations, crews worked 24 hours a day to build up a huge mountain of vital supplies that would later be moved into Little America. This stretch of bay ice is called Hope Valley, and it lies between Kainan Bay and Little America. Unloading operations were scarcely underway when the action of the waves and the surge of the tide began to create a turbulence throughout the bay. Now, all along the fringe of this critical area, small sections of ice began to break off. During the warm Antarctic summer, this is a normal condition. As a precaution, though, to protect the hulls of the cargo ships, the larger sections were pushed out of the area into the open sea. Then, in a matter of hours, there was a sudden rise in temperature, and now a real menace was disclosed. Deep cracks began to appear in the weakening bay ice, and these fissures lay between the supply dump and the solid ice shelf of Little America. To create an emergency escape road, the cracks first had to be enlarged by dynamiting. Then the crevices were quickly filled and packed with snow. For the next 72 hours, the men worked around the clock, fighting the battle against time on the ever-weakening ice. But finally, every ton of material was accounted for and stored in the supply dump at Little America. It was a narrow victory, though, for now a blizzard struck. During the course of the storm, 5 square miles of bay ice broke up and vanished, and a few frozen fragments marked the spot where Hope Valley had been only a few hours before. The design for the layout and construction of Little America was the result of careful planning. There would be more than 20 structures here, and they would include barracks, infirmary, power plants, shops, radio shack, mess lounge, and several special buildings and towers for scientific use. Although these buildings would vary in size and shape, the type of construction was identical throughout. First, metal girders were laid across a wooden foundation. Then, the prefabricated floor panels were set in place and joined by clamps, eliminating nails and bolts. All wall panels were connected in the same manner and fastened to the roof girders. There are no windows in these walls. The only openings are in the roof. After the buildings were completed, tons of snow were heaped against the exposed walls to serve as weatherproofing and to seal in the airspace beneath the buildings. To make each unit accessible to every other unit, regardless of weather, a system of connecting tunnels was constructed. Wire mesh and burlap may not appear to be a very substantial covering, but in a matter of days, the entire network of tunnels will be solidly encased in a protective blanket of snow. Of course, in Little America, as everywhere, medical emergencies were bound to occur. In this case, it was Air Controlman Alfred Gear in sick bay for an appendectomy. Millions of years of frigid climate have made Antarctica virtually a germ-free land as compared with other parts of the world. This fact, coupled with the surgeon's skill, made it possible for Alfred Gear to return to active duty almost before he was missed. Trailblazing, exploring the unknown, was a primary project of Operation Deepfreeze. Beyond the Rockefeller Mountains, about 600 miles from Little America, another scientific base was to be constructed. It would be called Bird Base. Problem number 1 was to discover whether a safe overland trail could be established to this remote spot. And so on January 14th, a party set out from Little America to find such a trail and to mark its course with flags. A crevasse detector attached to a weasel led the way. 2 days later, and only 60 miles out of Little America, a series of rough ice ridges crossed the trail. And here the party came to a halt. The crevasse detector had given its warning, and now probes were used to pinpoint the invisible pitfalls. After probing, the openings were widened by dynamite charges. At first, the crevasses uncovered were deceptively small, but further blasting revealed giant chasms, some large enough to swallow the Empire State Building. It was soon discovered that the direct course to their destination was riddled with these natural death traps, and the party had to make many detours. Finally, supplies and fuel exhausted, they were forced to call a halt, still 220 miles short of their goal. A flag planted in a snow cairn marked the farthest point ever traveled over land in this section of Antarctica. On February 3rd, an otter plane out of Little America arrived to fly the trail party home. Over an impromptu meal, it was decided to return the party in 2 flights. The first flight took off with 7 men aboard. This left 3 in camp, and they filled their time by stowing gear and supplies. Then, over the Weasel's radio antenna, an urgent message. The otter plane was overdue at Little America and was presumed lost. At once, the Weasel turned back along the trail in a search for the missing plane. After covering 130 miles, the 3 men were instructed by radio to make camp. Here they would rendezvous and combine their efforts with another search party out from Little America. While this group was setting up their field operation, back at the Little America base, an intensive search was going forward by air. And then, a radio report. The wreckage of the otter plane had been sighted, but it was in a remote and inaccessible spot. And so a helicopter was dispatched. At Little America and at McMurdo, the tension mounted. Today, it's a matter of history that the copter's return brought more than good news, for the lost were found. Every man had survived the crash unharmed. So, for a near tragedy, a happy ending, and a happy reunion for the trail party. It was 2 weeks after the return of the trail party that another tractor train set out from Little America. This was the cache party. Station 1, the first stop, was 58 miles east of Little America. These drums of fuel oil will remain here untouched throughout the winter. But with the coming of spring, tractor trains will move out along this trail to begin the construction of bird base, and they will refuel at these way stations. The cache party established 2 of these fuel supply stations, approximately 1 day's running time apart. And it was while they were moving on to station number 3 that the train began to run into difficulty. Although the trail had been thoroughly tested, hidden crevasses were a constant threat. And whenever they were found, they had to be solidly bridged with snow. It was here that tragedy struck. While filling one of these snow bridges, driver Max Keel in his D8 tractor backed into another crevasse, hidden and unmarked. The tapering walls crushed the cab and instantly killed the driver. It was found impossible to move the tractor or reach the body of the victim. News of the accident was radioed to Little America, and Chaplain Bull was flown to the site. He led the men in prayer and gave a last tribute to Max Keel, peacetime hero. Max Keel was the second task force man to lose his life in the performance of his duty. A few months earlier at McMurdo Sound, Richard Williams had perished when the tractor he was driving broke through the bay ice and sank. After the tragic accident, rope lines were rigged to the tractor controls so that no other driver's life might be risked in this dangerous area. Because of the accident, and because the daylight hours were waning now, no further caches were established. It was on March 10th, just 2 weeks after their departure, that the cache party returned to Little America. For countless centuries, the seals of McMurdo Sound had led a tranquil, lazy life. But now a plague had come upon the land, and the plague was man. To the seals, these oversized penguins were much too noisy and far too active. Some tried to ignore the disturbance, while others, in spite of themselves, began to show a certain curiosity. Saddest of all seals, however, was this fellow. Due to the noise and excitement, he's come down with a severe case of the fidgets. Finally, he makes a wise decision. After all, when your nerves are shot, the best thing to do is head for home and an ice-cold bath. In contrast to the seals, the penguins are completely sports-minded. They wouldn't miss a game for the world, and from all directions they scurry in for a front row seat. The rooting section seems to understand all the finer points of the game, and they follow every play. Finally, a long pass puts the game on ice. Somebody wins, somebody loses, and everybody's happy. And so the crowd breaks up and heads for home. These are Adelie penguins, by the way, but there are several other species here. It's only proper that we pay a courtesy call on some of our feathered hosts. So we're moving out now, along the coast of Wilkes Land, to a place where a colony of emperor penguins makes its home. community life here appears to be well organized. And in keeping with their name, the emperors always seem to conduct themselves in a regal and pompous manner. Largest of all penguins, emperors stand chest high to a man and often weigh as much as 80 pounds. For the most part, they live in peace and harmony with each other. All of this slapping and prodding and poking is quite harmless. They have extremely weak eyesight and use this method to identify one another. All parent birds show a remarkable devotion to their young. These proud fathers are literally walking on eggs. This is the approved penguin method of transporting one's future offspring in a pouch between the feet. After the chick is hatched, mother takes over the responsibility. All penguins love baby penguins, and there are never enough babies to go around. Any stray chick is instantly overwhelmed by half a dozen foster parents who want to adopt it. It's a fact that some of the youngsters are actually killed with kindness, but this little fellow's lucky. He survives and finds his way home to mother. Whenever the whole colony seems restless, the birds are probably talking about the weather. For after all, the weather is just about the only thing to talk about in these parts. Against the fury of the storm, this little lost chick can't survive. He needs protection. But just in time, the lost is found. To a full-grown penguin, once the storm is over, it's at once forgotten. But if you're still in the molting stage, it takes a little longer to thaw out. Eventually, there comes a time when Junior decides to take off on his own. With all this built-in ballast, you'd think he couldn't possibly fall. But he manages. Since the youngsters insist on traveling, the parents decide they might as well be organized. So the top sergeants take over, and the parade is underway. One, punch! Up, 2, 3, 4. Up, 2, 3, 4. Up, 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 up. Close it up there! Up, 2, 3. Oh, come on, fellas, close it up. Among the elder penguins, there's another kind of parade. When they get hungry, their only source of food is the sea. And now they hit the long, icy trail to the fishing grounds. Underwater, penguins can travel at speeds up to 30 miles an hour, and they consume large quantities of shrimp and squid and other small forms of sea life. When the fishing's over, penguins can dive out of the water as quickly as they dive in. A parent's first duty ashore is to share the day's catch with its ever-hungry young. As each Antarctic summer reaches its peak, the emperor penguins break the monotony of their life in the colony by embarking upon a strange and mysterious journey. Using seagoing ice floes like excursion boats, they drift hundreds of miles to the north. During the voyage, the molting birds will grow up and learn to fish for themselves, no longer depending upon their elders. And by the time winter sets in, instinct will have brought them home again. Such is one of the strangest of nature's changeless cycles, the life of the emperor penguin. But the penguins weren't the only ones traveling north. By the second week in March, ships of the task force were homeward bound, carrying most of the deep freeze personnel. At Little America, only the wintering over party remained. And at McMurdo, the last ship outward bound was the GB-4, the Glacier. Of course, all the men who stayed behind were volunteers. Those with wives and families couldn't help but view the departure with regret. But for homesickness, there's no cure like hard work. And here at McMurdo, there was much to be done. The most important job was the preparation of a landing strip. And although it wouldn't be used for many months, work was begun immediately. Cores were drilled in the bay ice to determine the depth of the snow and the thickness of the ice beneath it. The prevailing winds were established and the field laid out accordingly. From an area 1.5 miles long by 500 feet wide, all of the surface snow had to be removed. The days passed quickly, and the long Antarctic night closed in. But the work on the airstrip continued. The meteorologists at McMurdo made their headquarters inside a structure called the Rowan Dome. Here they assembled and set miniature radio transmitters. These devices were attached to weather balloons and released at regular intervals. Inside the Rowan Dome, the balloon was tracked by radar. This established the velocity and direction of the upper air currents. At the same time, weather data was being received from the balloon's radio transmitter. All this information was evaluated and plotted on weather maps, which in turn were transmitted by radio facsimile to the United States. And so already the geophysical year was paying off. Antarctica was making a valuable contribution to the weather knowledge of the world. Winter wasn't all work and no play. There was time for relaxation, too. From the local little theater group, there was no escape. This was really a captive audience. These were lazy days for all. And for these pups, it would be a long time before they learned what a dog's life really meant. fill their spare time, the men indulged in hobbies and handicrafts. But sometimes the needlework had a more practical purpose. And sewing a fine seam here calls for close concentration and a strong cigar. The cookhouse was one of the busiest spots at McMurdo. There was always plenty of good food, which added plenty of inches to waistlines. But of course, there are some things that even the best of foods can't supply. The one thing everyone looked forward to most was a trip to the radio shack and contact with the folks back home. This time, it's Tom Montgomery who's the lucky candidate. And now we'll see an actual family reunion taking place at almost the opposite ends of the Earth.
K2KGJ, calling K2KGJ. This is K34, UF3, working phone patch copy. We have Tommy Montgomery right here, and if you're ready, well, we'll give you the call and everything and get working on it. K2KGJ, K34, UF3.
In a split second, the call spans 10,000 miles of space to reach the home of Julius Mady at Clark, New Jersey. Mady is one of the many amateur radio operators without whose help these contacts could not be made.
Okay, Blaine, just hang on a second here and we will have Mrs. Montgomery on the phone.
By telephone, Julius relays the call to Tom Montgomery's home at Martha's Vineyard in Cape Cod.
Hello, Tom? This is wonderful. We are all fine here. We'll all be waiting on you to come back.
This will probably be the last call. I'll probably go to Poland over the 1st of November or so, and then come back here to the ships in January, the end of January, and then home in April. I kind of thought maybe if you could arrange it, why could you stick the children on?
Daddy, I got my birthday and I got a gun. I got a new shirt.
Did you hear what he said? Bring Penguin home.
Okay, Ann. I'm afraid I'll have to bring them pictures of penguins. I won't be able to bring a penguin home. I'll have to send them pictures, all right?
See if Duke recognizes your voice. Here's the dog.
Honey, I'm gonna have to stop now so other people can talk. I guess you know I miss you. You just take care of yourself and the children, and I will write some letters, and I'll see you as soon as I can.
KC4 USB, this is K2KGJ. Okay, Blaine, that finishes that. Do you have any more traffic for us? If not, we'll say 73 and pull the big switch here.
At McMurdo, there was a time to work, a time to relax, and of course a time to worship. There was only one chapel, but it was equally available to all denominations. Protected by a wall of mountains, the winters at McMurdo are usually less severe than at Little America. We're going to turn back the calendar now and watch the coming of winter darkness to the Little America base. Here, the last order of the summer was batten down the hatches. Soon the winds would reach hurricane force, more than 100 miles an hour. Temperatures would drop to 70 degrees below zero, and this, of course, called for a plentiful supply of fuel oil. Now winter struck. Below the surface, the lights of an underground city glowed warm and bright. For many months now, there would be little work and lots of leisure. After the busy summer, the men of Little America really enjoyed these idle hours, and they divided them equally between total physical collapse and strenuous physical exercise. Another popular pastime was going to the movies. And to provide a little extra warmth, at least in spirit, the Disney studio thoughtfully provided a favorite feature, the living desert.
In part, it's the painted desert, where petrified trees become their own tombstones. In part, this is a region of naked hills, a sea of burning sand.
The work schedule during the long night called for regular tours of inspection. These tours included a check of the half-buried mechanized equipment. And weather instruments were also inspected to make sure they were in working order. In his nightly rounds, the inspector would often exchange greetings with the observer in the Astrodome. The various phases of the geophysical scientific program are called disciplines, and the study of the Antarctic sky is one of the disciplines that continues all winter long. Of special importance is the strange phenomenon known as the aurora australis. Because of almost impossible lighting conditions, the aurora is almost impossible to photograph. This fact, however, was a challenge to the Disney photographer stationed at Little America. And so he contrived a special time-lapse camera, which he equipped with heating units to keep the wheels turning, even in temperatures 70 degrees below zero. The cameraman was to spend many nights out here at his frigid task. The aurora australis, like its counterpart, the aurora borealis, is caused by ions and electrons streaming out from the sun to converge at the Earth's magnetic poles. To the Disney camera, it still proved an elusive phenomenon. But these films are considered the clearest and most accurate to date. In late September, another blizzard celebrated the closing of winter. And then, the Antarctic dawned. With the coming of the sun, Little America would begin the task of digging out. But of course, before you dig out, you've got to break out. At first, the job had to be done by manpower alone, until the mechanized equipment could be cleared. Now, after a long winter in cold storage, the Navy flying machines would soon be taking to the air again. In a matter of days now, down at the edge of the bay ice, supply ships would be arriving. To haul their cargo to the base, safe trails for the tractors must be established. And so the crevasses had to be found and filled. Here again, the usual procedure was followed. Dynamite was used to expose the crevasses. Then they were bridged with a solid fill of snow. As Little America continued to dig itself out, across the ice shelf at the Williams Air Facility in McMurdo, the sled dogs greeted the return of daylight with a noisy welcome. Of course, the men needed conditioning too, so they took long overland hikes. To protect their faces and lungs from frostbite, special masks were worn. Hauling sleds of survival gear built strength and endurance, and camping overnight in temporary shelters was a realistic rehearsal for any emergency they might have to face. For everyone at McMurdo, this was a busy time of preparation. Drums of fuel oil were test dropped without parachutes to determine if the snow alone was enough to cushion their fall. The drums landed intact, but dented. A new type of weather instrument known as the grasshopper was also test dropped. The cylinder is automatically triggered to set itself up and raise its own antenna. Then it transmits radio signals to bases many miles distant, reporting all weather conditions. But perhaps the most important task was the completion of McMurdo's ice airstrip. In a matter of days, the first planes would be flying in from the north. That ridge in the distance, however, could not be moved, even by bulldozers. It's just a mirage. Since the entire airstrip was constructed on the bay ice, after leveling and scraping, water was pumped directly from the sea below to freeze and form a solid, smooth coating. By mid-October, work on the landing strip was just about complete. And so the Williams Air Facility put out the welcome mat. On October 17th, the first plane was due, and it arrived right on schedule. This was an R-5D, the flagship, bringing from New Zealand Admiral Geophysical, Task Force Commander. On landing, he was greeted by Commander Canham and the rest of the McMurdo staff. The following day, an Antarctic storm suddenly developed, and it chose a most inopportune time. 6 other planes were on their way from New Zealand, and they had to land, regardless of weather. Admiral Geophysical stayed close to the mobile air control tower at the edge of the landing strip. It was a time of intense anxiety. The first plane to arrive, a P-2V, was seen briefly as it approached the strip. Then it disappeared again as it turned for a landing. The controlman tried to talk the ship in. But now, in spite of all possible assistance, disaster. It took only moments to reach the plane, for it had crashed on the very edge of the airstrip. Of course, the first concern was for the injured survivors. But there were 4 who did not survive. They were Navy Lieutenant David M. Carey, crewman Marion Marzi and Charles S. Miller, and Marine Captain Rayburn A. Hudman. After the tragedy, the weather cleared rapidly, and the rest of the flight made safe landings. The following week, the big C-124s flew in. These giant planes were air freighters, bringing in new and much needed equipment. And so in December of 1956, Operation Deepfreeze No. 1 comes to a close, and Deepfreeze No. 2 begins. At the point of transition, there was great tragedy. The crash of the P-2V and the loss of too many heroic lives. And yet the sacrifice of these men has not been in vain. They died to show others the way, and the way of the pioneer lies ever toward the future. Now the future of Deepfreeze 2 is becoming the present. On the coast of the Weddell Sea, a party of scientists establishes United States Base No. 7. From here, trail parties explore deep into Edith Ronnie Land. In Marie Byrd Land, tractor trains bring men and material from Little America, and the construction of Byrd Base begins. Out of the Williams Air Facility at McMurdo, planes fly to the pole, airdropping supplies and building materials to establish and serve the base there. Along the western coast of the continent, an icebreaker leads a cargo ship through ice-choked waters to establish United States Base No. 5. Thus, a great true-life adventure goes forward. And yet this is only the dawn of the geophysical year. There is much still to be told as men of science continue their search for knowledge in the frozen wastes of Antarctica.